Secret Invasion was a show with immense potential that its creators, producers, and platform were content to neglect. First things first, this isn't a rant on the broader MCU. I'm sick of it, you're sick of it, it's the lowest rated MCU series of all time and its viewing numbers are conducive with that fact. Just putting a clip of WandaVision in this timeline makes me want to break down crying when I remember how many times that poor horse was beaten. Secret Invasion wasn't a show I decided to give a chance because of its IP, or its cast, or its connection to a wider story that's years out. That ship has sailed. It was its allure and appeal of being a spy thriller in the Marvel Universe that I was interested in. This time there would be intrigue, personal stakes, a problem that couldn't be solved by traditional means, exploration of how this cast of small players function, as well as a world with politics that need to be maneuvered around and manipulated by those at the ground level. But to perhaps nobody's surprise, that promise was not fulfilled. Nothing felt grounded, the world and characters felt phony, and the script felt like it was trying to emulate the spy thriller genre instead of genuinely and earnestly being that genre. That is, when it wasn't just going back to old habits for the sake of it. It's difficult to express the sheer level of my disappointment at how wasted this premise was. The show writes itself, you're working with such a great cast in a universe that affords you such a great big sandbox of storytelling potential. As I watched through each episode, clawing and nagging, I couldn't help hold back the thought that Disney had done this song and dance so much better before, with 10 times the resonance, and the name of that impression was Andor.
Who are you? What do I sacrifice? Everything!
Andor is one of many Star Wars shows to release on Disney+. Much like Marvel, Space Wizard Money Gang has been spamming out slop on the streaming service since it was created. The Mandalorian, Book of Boba, Kenobi were all released onto the platform and all contained a ton of issues that devalue the potential of the IP for interesting, nuanced storytelling. Mando was cool at first, but as the years went on, its taste soured and became more and more unbearable. That combined with the disappointing movie output, the monumental failure of nostalgic cash grabs like Book of Boba and Kenobi, it became hard to have faith for anything going forward. Especially when it came to Andor, a show set to follow a nobody space terrorist who most people don't even remember got blown up by the Death Star in 2016, and those that do don't really care about him. There's an obvious parallel there to what situation Marvel has been in for the last few years. Phases 4 and 5 completely tarnished the franchise's reputation, and its show sent the same message my own YouTube channel sends with every upload. That it's either too lazy or too insecure to change, doomed to repeat the same cycles forever until it dies for good in a bed of its own making. But Andor is great, it's everything I wanted out of Secret Invasion. The show has almost none of the traditional Star Wars hallmarks. Jedi, Sith, lightsabers, the Force, all gone. Relegated to background detail or a footnote in the greater universe. Andor has other priorities than reinforcing the same tired tropes and ideas its predecessors have. It's about intrigue, about maneuvering around or influencing a system they all function under. Some seeking to help tighten its grip, others hoping to pry it open and tear the whole system down. But these are all just people. Every single member of Andor's cast aren't particularly special. There's no Jedi, no big characters we know will one day change the world. The main character's biggest contribution to this universe is dying on a tropical island after helping somebody send plans that will help another guy blow up a space station that will be rebuilt later and blown up again. And that's what's so great about it, it delivered on its promise. This is a small stake story that seeks to have it be personal to its cast. While there's obvious differences, it's clearly evident that both of these shows has similarities in what they're trying to go for. Secret Invasion follows Nick Fury, trying to navigate and overcome aliens invading every part of human society. Every institution, every faction leading to no easy out of the situation. He's got to use his wits, his cunning and skills to fight back against these impossible odds. Trust no one, the walls have ears. Andor follows mercenary, thief, smuggler and rogue Cassian Andor trying to navigate around the impossible, incomprehensible power of the Galactic Empire. An all-encompassing, omnipresent and omniscient faction infecting every part of the galaxy with its control. It's everywhere, something he can't easily ignore and escape, forcing him to use his wits, cunning and skills to try and fight back against these impossible odds. Both are part of big, larger-than-life franchises, and both are trying to scale back and be more intimate with their stories. Follow characters that aren't superpowered or have any special abilities that make them different than any other normal guy. These are supposed to be ants fighting back against the ant bully. Little dots on a screen, a small number out of billions, krill on a vast ocean, fearfully wondering about who can be trusted, how situations can be avoided, prevented, or manipulated despite the deck not being in their favor, where every choice made is a move on a grand cosmic chessboard. At least you think that would be more the case for the other. While one executes its concept incredibly well, feeling earnest and made with a lot of love and thought, the other feels like it was written by an AI, being told to apply a spy action filter to an otherwise pretty bland story. There's a million ways to dodge around or meander from the point, but ultimately the reason why Andor succeeds where Secret Invasion failed comes down to one very simple thing. Andor justified everything. It took great care to introduce a framework and add a why behind everything. From basic things like the motivations of its characters and why the Empire does what it does, to easy to ignore things like how small cultures, towns and basic civilian life is affected by whatever's happening. Everything has cause and effect. The show starts with a murder, meaning Cassian has to account for an alibi and ensure it isn't traced back to him. It puts in the effort to show why characters like Dedra and Cyril would serve and aid the Empire despite everything, reinforcing how a tyrannical system like this can continue to exist. It is a masterclass in world building. And I know the obvious question. Why does that matter? What does Secret Invasion have in it that necessitates world building? This isn't Westeros, this is the MCU we're talking about. A broadly apolitical franchise that doesn't have much in that department. Whether or not people want to admit it, Star Wars does have some interesting, compelling politics to explore and test. It's a sci-fi universe heavily influenced by real history and how tyranny in all its stages has been confronted or allowed to grow. Looking just at the prequels, a major driving force was executing the idea of how democracy falls into fascism when the worst people take advantage. Andor has an enormous sandbox to work with, a history that influences how every character lives their life, and factions with varying ideologies that influence trust and allegiances.
Alliance, SEP, Guerrilla, Partisan Front.
And that is what is missing from Secret Invasion. In order to have a show like this, cause for an effect is an absolute necessity. We need to know the why. Why do characters act a certain way? What are the reasons for what is happening? Both of these shows are about real people. Talking specifically about Secret Invasion, the thematic undertones of the whole show is about immigration. The whole premise starts with Nick Fury allowing an entire species of alien refugees to hide out on Earth to avoid being genocided by another alien race. What does that mean for different characters? Who is willing to go along with the current arrangement? And why does some want to rebel and take over the whole planet for themselves? How does the world react? What state is the political landscape in that allows a takeover to happen and erupt into an all-out war? I'm generalizing, broad stroking and maybe not providing enough context behind the potential, but the point is a premise like that means you need to have it be justified. You need to establish what this world looks like and what these people are beyond faceless drones. What about the world makes these people who they are? I don't know anything about the Skrulls save for what the show tells me. That they're refugees with no planet, that in the past they were given a deal that they can stay on Earth while Fury finds them a home in exchange for being secret spies throughout the globe. A couple of years passed, Fury got turned to dust, the Skrulls didn't get their planet, they're pissed and they decided they wanted to make Earth their home and cut out the middleman. They're sick of living in hiding, forgoing their real identity to placate to something they have no inherent loyalty or obligation to.
What do you want? Home in my own skin.
Which is a good foundation, I admit, but the concept is half-baked or contradictory. Contradictory is in home in their own skin just means staying in disguises 24/7. Presumably to save on makeup, despite that flying in the face of their apparent ideology. Glad to see that 212 million is paying off, I love this, it looks really good. And half-baked is in we never actually get to see the Skrulls living their lives. We never see their struggle beyond what we're told they feel like. Gravik had potential to be an interesting antagonist with an understandable motivation, but in typical MCU fashion for these kind of villains, they scrap that to make him a psychotic, apathetic monster who kills his own men, willing to have them all die just so he can have petty revenge. He's not a great example. I want to know about the undercover guys, the burden of wearing a face that isn't yours every day, the normal people who enlist in this cause and follow it so loyally and faithfully. We get an impression, but once again, not much more than that. No POV character, nobody who we see impartially through, it's there as dressing. Secret Invasion is one of those shows that makes you feel like you have X-ray vision. I can see through the series and picture the writer sitting in a shitty apartment with a blank document with a 2-day deadline and rushing to find a quick justification. Why does a World War III happen between America and Russia? Why would it happen? This isn't our world, there presumably ain't no Ukraine Putin is tormenting, and Disney sure as hell wasn't going to tie real world politics into it. As far as we know, everything is all sunshine and daisies before the events of the show. Politics isn't my strong suit at all, so I don't want to play guessing games for something I know nothing about. But it does speak to an immense laziness that they explain away all this as being an action from an extremist group called
the AAR, Americans Against Russia.
Like what? That's what you came up with? That's so lame! Why does this group even exist in the first place? You can't have a show like this with a conflict like this and not bother to ground its politics. It's a net positive for the whole show in every aspect when you put in that legwork. The Galactic Empire in Andor is something written so well that it kind of blows my mind how they made a concept so on the nose and simple into something I understand, believe, and like the characters hate and want to see torn down. Andor's empire isn't given a big history lesson. We're never told told about what it once was and how it ended up what it is, because that's superfluous. What's important is what it is and what it means to the characters in operation. We see how it infects every part of the galaxy like a cancer, growing silently and slowly but surely engulfing the identity of everything it consumes. Cultures are snuffed out, swift decisive action is enforced, and their strengths and weaknesses are on full display. We see what the lives of regular people are like. We see Cassian's little town, all its inhabitants, their routine, their lives, and what it's like when that's all disrupted by the arrival of the Galactic Empire. Nothing happens out of convenience or feels like a cheap get out of jail free card from the writer. Secret Invasion's inciting incident in the first episode is flashed past so quickly and without hardly any build up that it feels confusing and like senseless noise. No calm before the storm, Andor's inciting incident starts with a murder and then spirals. We get that build up, politics and bureaucracy is established, X leads to Y and Y leads to Z. The Empire has a system, it responds in a way the audience can understand, it's not muddled or messy. We talked a lot about world building, how the universe remains grounded, how Andor does it good and Secret Invasion does it poorly. But to address the elephant in the room, Andor and Secret Invasion's messaging is not one for one. Andor is about fascism through the sci-fi lens of the Galactic Empire, serving as a component in a greater story about how revolution and change comes from normal people not standing by and allowing themselves to be oppressed. Secret Invasion, on the other hand, while containing a vague allegory for immigration, isn't really interested in exploring that beyond the surface level icing on the shit cake. It's about its title, there's a secret invasion, body snatcher shit, oh my god, these things have scales, actual lizard men, are you a Skrull? What do we do? Despite not trying to provide any kind of commentary, the reason I place such importance on world building and politics conceptually is that they are the glue that bonds those latter elements together. If you're gonna do a show about espionage, infiltration, and the walls having ears, it's important to marry that to the world you're telling the story in. The politics of Andor and how the Empire displays fascism isn't very important in a literal sense, but from a writing perspective of this idea, it's completely relevant. The nature of a government like the Empire is that nobody can ever really feel safe, whether you're at the top or at the bottom, all equally as likely of being snuffed out by its all-seeing eye, and what do you know it, that's what influences the actions characters take. True to its word, every action and interaction requires deliberate maneuvering and sniffing out the intentions of whoever they choose to engage with. ISB agent trying to move up the corporate ladder? She needs to be careful of how she pleads her case against her opposition in a meeting. One wrong move could set her back and make more enemies to keep her down. Luthen Rail was a paranoid rebel, lurking in the shadows, operating with anonymity, always watching his back and willing to do anything it takes to further the cause or look out for his own self-interest. He's a player in a game where information is power. He keeps his true nature hidden behind personas, proxies, and an understanding of the world he lives in. Trust nobody, you can always be tracked, know your surroundings.
Never carry anything you don't control.
Consequently, Mon Mothma is the same, a character in a political world where every action performed is being closely monitored by the Empire. Her driver, she suspects, is an ISB agent, her allies scattered and her resources limited. When she does meet up with people, it's done through careful deception, not giving away any signal of her true intentions.
I show you the stone in my hand. You miss the knife at your throat.
When the characters exist in a world where anybody could be a spy or a traitor or a real untrustworthy son of a bitch, paranoia runs rampant. Through the Empire, we get a picture of how they maintain control, how they project power, and subsequently that influences how the show flows from point to point. Andor exists in a world of greys where even your allies are not to be trusted. How can you trust them? Everyone has their own agendas, their own grand cause. The ISB clearly has plans amongst members of the Rebellion, and the Rebellion has plans in the ISB. That's why I said at the beginning of this video, every move the characters make is part of a strategy on a grand cosmic chessboard. Sometimes the rebels do something unexpected, like the heist in Aldani, and other times the Empire has eyes on the ground that can predict moves before they're made. Deception, manipulation, strategy, spycraft. Are you a spy? What's your agenda? Why are you asking so many questions? Why should we place our trust in you?
Either you're an Imperial spy, you're fronting for the person I really want to speak to, or you're the thing itself.
There are so many examples to pull from, but at risk of sounding redundant by hammering home the same point 50, 60, 70 times, Secret Invasion does not do this. Bizarrely. Part of why I loved Andor is that it applies thought and logic to things you wouldn't think it would. The fact that the show actually considers the implications on how the Empire influences things like trust and cooperation is something that in Star Wars is pretty easy to ignore so you can have the story you want. Secret Invasion, on the other hand, is built around this idea that Andor did so well. Skrulls can become anyone, they can take their form and minds. Theoretically, if you turn your back for even a second, there's no telling if who you're talking to is the same person or not. And when you're thinking about the potential of that, you start to get excited. Part of the fun of watching a show like this is playing a guessing game of who's who and what's what. When I rewatch Andor with context, I can notice things I didn't on a first watch that in retrospect are obvious. This ISB guy is a rebel spy. When you first watch the show, you don't really pick up on it, but upon rewatch, the signs are there.
I don't think we should step away.
It's simple, but it's something that keeps you around, keeps you guessing. Secret Invasion only has one of these moments, and it's right in the opening where they reveal Martin Freeman was a Skrull for, I guess, since the show started? Point is, this means nothing. We don't get much of Martin Freeman before this reveal. If we follow them for a couple of episodes or had a few minutes that baits us into thinking he's a major character, then maybe that would be something. But his function of the overall plot is to be told exposition, die, and reveal that Skrulls are a thing. Even if you love Martin Freeman from Black Panther, he's your favourite guy, you know all his quotes, had them plastered on your wall, this still amounts to nothing because we have no context of when he was replaced, what his function was, or what moment led to his capture. He could be any other generic government guy and the reveal has just as much impact. Same goes for Rhodey. Biggest Skrull reveal is the easiest to see coming. We get one scene with him before the knife is fully shown and then it plays its hand too early. He acts kind of out of character, he doesn't do anything but be antagonistic or play against Fury's interests. Watch the show back, his reveal means nothing. In the moment even, it didn't amount to much. This isn't a beloved character we know and love, this is Iron Man's boring friend. Even in the scope of a grander universe, does this mean anything or have any wide-reaching implications? No, not at all. For the characters, this isn't even a big deal. Fury, Talos, Olivia Colman never rethink their positions, second-guess their allies, or worry about information they may have let slip. Spies in Andor are a pretty big deal. People's paranoia overtakes them quickly when they entertain the possibility that the entire exchange is an elaborate setup. And why wouldn't you act like that? What could you have revealed in that time? What does that mean for you? Have you played into the enemy's hands? I feel like I'm going crazy here, but that's the whole point of doing this espionage stuff, isn't it? To build upon the idea of paranoia, to be small stakes and explore just how these characters function in a world where the odds are just so catastrophically stacked against them. In the MCU as well, a universe that has a lot to draw upon and one in which a similar story was told in a way that is worthy of the premise. How does this universe respond to and create countermeasures against infiltration after the Hydra thing went down? Going with the immigration subtext, what is the worldwide sentiment on aliens in this universe, given all the weird space shit they had to endure? How engraved into our society are the Skrulls? There are so many interesting story concepts and so many avenues they could have taken this show that just seem so obvious. Despite what the show is about, the characters never react how any normal person would when finding out anyone they know and love could be an imposter. They never define a clever method used to identify Skrulls other than just shooting them. Olivia Colman and Nick Fury find out things or reach solutions not through deliberation or gathering information, but rather just because they need to keep the story moving at a breakneck pace. That's so boring. If the writers are going to put in so little work, I have to question what's the point. Why play around in this sandbox? Why not be inventive with what you have? Why just fall back on the familiar tricks that everyone is sick of? I can see an obvious response to this video would be how much time is a factor. Andor has 12-hour-long episodes while Secret Invasion has 6, ranging from 35 to 55 minutes. But Secret Invasion had a $217 million budget, while Andor had a $250 million budget. And that one actually feels like that. Everything looks amazing, and you can feel strongly that every penny spent was done to make the best show they possibly could. Secret Invasion has no excuse to be this short and this expensive. It looks like shit, scripts feel like they were written in an afternoon, and it just feels like an empty, hollow shell of a golden concept. Every part of this show fits that analogy. Like the intro, the show doesn't feel real, like it came from a human mind, because it wasn't. It was churned out by a machine with little thought or consideration of what matters in a show like this. Calls for an effect is an obvious one I'm hammering to death, but beyond that, if you want to be character focused, if you want to drive drama through subtext and how the wheels of the world turn, then you need to put some spirit into it. Star Wars is an IP I'm incredibly divorced from now. I don't love Andor because it's connected to this universe that has been a part of my life since I was 4. I love it because of how much thought is put into it, how much these stories are driven by real people. Cassian, Luthen, Mon Mothma, Biggs, Dedra, Cyril, Partagast, Marva, and Kino Loy are all real people, driven by a past, by an ideology, by a determination that they don't want to kneel over and accept the status quo. It's a show that feels real in a universe that feels alive. We know what they sacrificed, and when we're at a moment where that all comes to a head, it feels so earned and satisfying.
If I could do it again, I'd wake up early and be fighting these bastards from the start. Fight the Empire!
You don't write to break people's hearts. You write from the heart, and that breaks people's hearts. The monologues here are not about information. They're just about the soul, of the characters. And it's the moment, almost say what you already know. And having the characters say it establishes a connection
I look at the other one, and those monologues are completely that. When this show was coming out, I remember praise being thrown at the mere existence of a monologue, at the fact that there was a torture scene in a Marvel show. But these are the most meager scraps you're ever gonna get. These speeches feel so empty. I don't come away learning anything about the characters. It isn't done to reveal anything personal or elevate an idea. It's done for exposition to rush towards a series of events. When it's at its best, writing is the soul of a work. It is the driving force behind everything and what makes something immortal. Beyond the craft of putting story components together, what sticks with you is how artfully things like information, character, and theme are conveyed. This show does not have that spirit. It's cheap, pointless, and it upsets me how much of the passion for this project was clearly lost. Broadly speaking, Disney doesn't care about writers, viewing them as a disposable commodity that exists to just give justification to products like Secret Invasion or Kenobi. Shit something out, put it on the slate. Story doesn't really matter as long as it's quick and provides easy content for the streaming service. I never cared about Secret Invasion's place in a broader universe. I was never interested in what it could set up or who could show up. What I wanted from Secret Invasion was the same thing I wanted and got from Andor. A small story centered around political espionage and characters that I could get invested in. It didn't need to be an event. Nobody was asking for this big stupid fight. Why place a 6-episode mandate on shows like this when there's easily so much more room for expansion? Andor wasn't a disposable show made to fit onto a slate and fuel an IP. It was a show made by people who loved and cared about their material, hoping to push it to greater and greater heights. I want more shows like that, ones that try something, that make me think, that make me feel, that actually respect the writing process. That put in a cause for the effect, making me come away at the end feeling something other than apathy, disappointment, and shame. And with that, I've been Typoh. Like, subscribe, comment, and all that, and I'll see you soon.